Most of us don't really want to spend that much time thinking about our money. So if we can figure out a way to do it easily and lazily, people are actually going to stick to it. No one else is going to do this for you. And even the people who do it for you, which I'm using air quotes, you have to understand what they're doing. Because if you do not understand what they're doing, you have no idea if they're doing what's in your best interest or not.
Welcome to today's episode of the Mr MoneyJar show. Today we're joined by Chloe Daniels, aka Clo Bare. Chloe is our first international guest. She's from the United States, and she is well known for creating what she calls the lazy method to investing. So it's another investing episode for all of you. If you're interested in how to invest, which platforms to pick, which funds to choose, Chloe's an absolute pro at all of that. And it was really great to be able to have her in the UK and see her. So I think you're going to enjoy this one, particularly the woman as well. So you're tuned into the Mr MoneyJar show. It's showtime. Welcome.
Hey, it's so exciting to be your first international guest.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, literally just came to London just for this.
And you're stopping off in Portugal next, is it?
Portugal's next. Yep, I'm going to go visit some more finance friends. So I don't know if you know like Deli Ann, the money coach, and Better Wallet. And yeah, so
I've heard of Better Wallet.
Yeah. So Mark and I are really close, and we call ourselves like the trauma squad, because every time that we talk about like, oh, why are we so driven to succeed? We're like, it's the trauma. So our trauma squad's meeting up.
All right, cool. We can get into that later, but yeah. I sometimes wonder if I'm driven by like the need to like prove people wrong.
100%. Yeah.
And even like prove myself wrong, like my previous self.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we get into all of that, it would just be great to hear a bit about you, who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So as he said, I'm Clo Bare money coach, and I focus on teaching people how to invest and build wealth the lazy way. So if you find me on Instagram or TikTok, you're not going to find a lot of like coupon clipping or super frugal, no spend months, that sort of thing. I really focus on, I kind of like to think about it like the 80-20, where it's like, what is the 20% of things that we can be doing that's causing 80% of the impact? And for me, I truly believe that that is increasing your income and investing the money. So doing some big things that create the most impact. So yeah, that's what we focus on. And the lazy way, because most of us don't really want to spend that much time thinking about our money. So if we can figure out a way to do it easily and lazily, people are actually going to stick to it.
How long have you been doing this for? Because we've been connected since the pandemic, I want to say.
So I've dabbled in the space. I think I started dabbling in finance back in 2020, and I was still doing like the mental health stuff. And it wasn't until March 2021 where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this seriously. I had spent like 4 years doing Clo Bare, the blog, which was like mental health, relationships, personal growth. And then eventually I was like, ooh, I really need to figure out this money thing, because money's tied to all that. Money's tied to our mental health, our security, our ability to do the things that we want. And so after doing that for 3 years, it was 2020, I was like, do I really want to keep spending so much time blogging when like nothing's happening? It hasn't turned into anything. And so I took a break. And by 2021, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like go all in on this money thing because that's all I cared about. That was all I wanted to learn about. That was all what I wanted to talk about. I wasn't really interested in not necessarily the mental health thing anymore. It's just like when you're healed, it didn't feel like so present, and I needed to talk about it all the time. So, but money was something that I was super, super interested in. So 2021, I was like, let's just give it a year. And if I still feel burnt out and like this isn't really going anywhere, then I'll quit and or reevaluate. And by October, I quit my job and did Clo Bare full time. So the whole like giving myself a timeline of we're going to go all out and see what happens, because the last thing I wanted was to someday look back and be like, I wish I had tried,
Congratulations. I love that story. I love that you had a vision, that you executed, and that you were able to leave your job.
Yeah.
What was your previous job, by the way? I don't think I know that.
Oh man, I've had so many different jobs, which is why I love talking to people about jobs, because my path was not linear at all. I first taught English in China, and then after I taught English in China, I came home and I was like a fundraiser. So I did development and things like that, and then programs and communications. And then eventually when I ended my career, I was a communications and marketing consultant at an engineering firm. So I was working with engineers, which means I often was required to take really complicated things and make it super plain English for the general public, which I think helps me in the finance space too, because that's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah, likewise. My first job out of uni was at a PR company, and I was on the research team, and I had to do a lot of number crunching, but then turn that into press releases, which then got used in newspapers and stuff. And it was again like taking complex ideas and simplifying them. So I think that stood me in good stead. And in a way, I'm still kind of doing that to this day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always say the jargon is there to try and gatekeep wealth. And it's like, we have to demystify it. We have to break down the language.
So what a lot of people might not know is that you have been on an incredible finance journey, including being able to increase your net worth by £400,000 in the last 4 years, I believe.
It's so funny hearing you say pounds. I'm like, what is that in dollars?
$400,000.
Yes. So I started my money journey at the end of 2018 when I kind of had a oh crap moment where I kept getting promoted at my job and was making more money than I ever thought I would make. And I was like, this also just keeps disappearing. I keep like making more money and saying, oh, eventually I have emergency fund. Eventually I'll start investing. Eventually I'll figure this stuff out. But that never happened. And so when I got a promotion, I was like, okay, dumber people than me have figured this out before. Like there's people online who are retiring early to travel the world. And that was something that I thought I really wanted at the time. And so after getting completely obsessed with this blog called Millennial Revolution, they're a Canadian couple, I felt so jealous of their journey. And I had to have this moment of honesty with myself of like, well, why are you jealous? You're jealous because you want to do this. And so I was like, well, what if I just try? What if I just try to figure this out? And that was October 2018. And I had about 70K of debt, mostly from student loans, but also from a car note. And originally, I started the journey with this idea that the ultimate thing was debt freedom, because I believed, well, investing's for smarter people. Investing's for people who know what they're doing. Investing is for like the bros on Wall Street. It's not for like people who studied English and Spanish in college. And so I kind of really went in with this idea. My whole plan was called the Debt Free by 33 plan, which is funny because I'm 32 now. And we'll talk a little bit more about like what actually happened. But about a year and a half in, I was like, wait a second. The more I educated myself on finances, I couldn't ignore this huge piece of the puzzle of actual wealth building. It's not just about debt freedom. It's about wealth building. It's about increasing your assets. It's about investing. And so finally in 2020, I was like, all right, we're just going to do it. We're just going to figure this out. We're going to dive in. And that's when I did it. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured getting started was the best thing I could do. And it was, because then, a month later when I understood what index funds were and things like that, I just went in and changed it. So had I only focused on debt freedom, I certainly wouldn't have increased my net worth as much as I did from 2018. So yeah, from negative 70 to a little over 300,000 now is the journey.
Very, very impressive. And for you, what is investing and what is it not? Because I think that it's a subject that there are a lot of misconceptions around, and that can be quite scary for some people. A lot of people feel like they might lose their money. That's quite risky. So what does investing mean to you?
Yeah, so I ask this question of my students when you think of investing, what do you think of? And their answers are always like, Wolf of Wall Street, a bunch of dudes in suits yelling at each other and the stock market exchange. Like, that's what people think investing is. And that's a lot different than what actual investing is. That's trading often, where we're trying to like time the stock market, watching when a stock price goes up, watching when it goes down so that we can like make a profit and things like that. That's really not what you or I are talking about when we're talking about investing. We're talking about buying really well-diversified assets that you can, for some people, depending on what your portfolio goals and allocations are, you could buy one thing that has everything that you need in it if you need it, if you had a super simple portfolio, and then you just get to like keep adding money to it and let it sit and let it grow. That's what true investing is. And the trading, the buying and selling, the timing the market, thinking that you can outsmart the smartest people on Wall Street is way more like gambling. And studies have showed consistently that you're not going to do it. Like, you may get lucky once or twice. Like, everybody's got a story of like, well, my cousin made 30 grand day trading Netflix or whatever. But when you look at the studies and you look at the statistics, it's just not oh, it's not effective. It's going to take a lot of time. You're going to lose money more often than you make money. And it's like, no wonder we all think that investing is risky, because that's what we think investing is. But in reality, investing is way more boring. It's way lazier than that. It's buying and holding onto well-diversified assets, essentially, to build your wealth.
Yeah, and there's a concept called survivorship bias, which is really good for people to know, which is that if you hear about that one person who, won the jackpot on investing, what you're not hearing is the 9 other people who lost money. And because when it comes to money, people are way more likely to report the wins rather than the losses. Those are the stories that end up making it through.
Well, and it's not only that, like, then on the flip side, we're also battling my uncle lost all this money in the stock market. My uncle lost all this in the .com crisis. What about the housing crisis and things like that, or not the housing crisis, the great financial crisis of 2008. And so you're battling not only the story of what you think investing is and think like, oh, I'll be the one who's smart enough to win, essentially, but you're also battling this idea that it's risky already because of stories you've heard from other people. So it's like we're out there holding a sign on the road just being like, it's not that complicated, it's not that difficult, and it's not as risky as you think it is.
Well, you actually call it the lazy way.
Yeah.
That's part of your brand.
Yeah.
So like what's the lazy way of investing?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I think most of us have better things to do than be paying attention to our money every single day and like worrying about what the stock market is doing, especially when we know that's not particularly effective. So the lazy way of investing is all about automation, and it's all about setting it up so that you really don't have to pay attention to it most of the time. So that looks like you and I talk a lot about index funds. I think you call them tracker funds in the UK. But let's say you were really hungry or you were really craving like candy, and you go into the 7-Eleven or the Tesco and you're like, okay, I'm craving candy. I'm craving something sweet, but I don't really know what I'm craving. So you go in, you look around, and you're like, well, I guess I'm just going to pick this Kit Kat and hope that it satisfies that craving. You're like, all right, I'm just going to get one thing. That's it. And you go home and you're like, well, maybe it will satisfy the craving or not. I don't know. Instead, what if you went into the Tesco and you were like, oh, there's a Halloween-sized bag of candy in here. And that Halloween-sized bag of candy has hundreds, if not thousands, of different stocks. I mean, chocolates inside of them. That's kind of the difference of buying an individual stock versus buying an index fund or a tracker fund or any kind of mutual fund ETF. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about lazy investing, is instead of trying to be fancy and pick these individual stocks and individual candy bars and thinking that you're going to win with these select stocks, why not just buy them all? Because you know that in that Halloween-sized bag of candy that's filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of different chocolates or stocks or whatever it is, the metaphor is getting blurry.
No. So what's really interesting is I use chocolates.
Oh, really?
Too. I genuinely do. I say buying stocks is like buying an individually wrapped like chocolate bar. And then you have celebrations in the States, don't you?
I don't know.
You don't have celebrations?
What is celebrations?
Celebrations is a red, well, I'll try and show it to you before you head back to UK, but it's a red tub of chocolates, and it's got mini Snickers, mini Twixes, mini Marses, mini Bounties.
Oh, I don't know if we don't call them that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the bags. But you said they're red?
The brand is literally called Celebrations.
Oh, that's interesting. No, we have,
it'll be in most supermarkets as well.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think about it. I used to say box of chocolates, but I'm like, actually, like a bag of Halloween-sized candy makes the most sense, because it's like you're going to get all these different chocolate bars inside of them. And it's like, even like a needle in the haystack. When you're trying to pick an individual stock, it's like trying to pick a needle in a haystack. That's going to be really hard to do. Most people are not going to be effective. It's going to take a lot of time. And like, why do you want to waste your time doing something that's not particularly effective? Instead, just buy the whole haystack. Take the whole haystack. It's going to have some needles inside of it. Needles in this case are a good thing. But that's why I was like, I don't like the needle in a haystack like allegory or metaphor. The chocolate one is more fun, and it's like, it's easy. You're going to have like that craving is going to get hit. You're going to succeed if you buy the bag of chocolates rather than if you're just trying to pick these individual things.
Yeah. When I got started my investing journey, I started by trying to buy that individually wrapped chocolate bar.
Because that's what we all think of.
Find the needle in the haystack. But I learned about index funds, tracker funds, we call them both here, and that really changed the game for me. but they can be quite difficult for people to get their head around, for people that are just starting with this. So if we go super literal, just super simple, like how do you invest the lazy way? Like how do you actually buy an index fund or a tracker fund?
Sure. So the first thing that you need to understand is that your retirement account is not an investment. So I know you have the stocks and shares ISA here, and you've got your pension and things like that. So in the US, we have the Roth IRA. Everybody thinks a Roth IRA is an investment. They're like, what's a good Roth IRA? And I'm always like, one that allows you to buy the investments that you want to buy. So I actually recently had a reel where I was trying to break down how investing works. And the way that it works is, picture like those nesting dolls where you have one big nesting doll, and inside that nesting doll, you've got another nesting doll, and then inside that doll, you've got another doll. So the first big nesting doll, that is a brokerage account, okay? A brokerage account is, think about it like the store for where you can go buy, like open your accounts and buy the stocks that you want to go buy. That's the first thing you need. So you guys have Hargreaves Gosh, I totally butchered that name.
No, Hargreaves Lansdowne.
Yes,
so
Vanguard.
What you call a brokerage account, we'll call an investing platform.
Perfect, investing platform. So in the US, we've got Charles Schwab, Vanguard, Fidelity, things like that. Robinhood, stuff like that. I don't like Robinhood, so that's not an endorsement. But anyway, so that's the big nesting doll number one. Nesting doll number two, which keep in mind, this nesting doll lives inside of the big nesting doll. So it's like you open up the first nesting doll, inside of it, we've got the second one, and that's the account type. So that's your stocks and shares ISA, it's your pension, it's your Roth IRA, it's your 401k. You cannot have that without the first nesting doll. That's impossible. You have to have the first nesting doll, and then inside of it, you get to pick the account type. Now, here's where so many people get confused, is they think they're done. Okay, I open the account, I move some money in, I have a 401k, I have a Roth IRA, I have a stocks and shares ISA. They don't realize, you need to go buy investments. You have to go purchase the investments. So that's the third doll. So we open up that second doll, and inside of that is the third doll, which is the investments that you purchase. So when we're talking about the lazy way of investing, automation is key, which is why a lot of my lazy investors will focus on index mutual funds, not index ETFs, unless they're using a robo-advisor, and not to get too deep into the weeds, because I know that difference can be really confusing. The key thing you really need to know about the difference between index ETFs and index mutual funds is that you can automate index mutual funds. With index ETFs, unless you're using a fintech company like M1 Finance or a robo-advisor, you can't actually automate it. You'd have to go in every single month into that brokerage account, into that Roth IRA, and purchase the thing that you want to purchase every single month, just like an individual stock. Whereas if you're doing it with mutual funds, granted, I know some brokerages have like minimums that require people to invest for, a minimum of $3,000. Things like Fidelity doesn't have a minimum, so I'm sure they've got that in the UK as well. But you can buy, let's say you want to buy the S&P 500 index from Fidelity. You can buy that, and you can set up an automation so that every single month you're putting $100 into it or $200 into it or however much that you want. That's the best way to do it, because if you can automate it and you treat it like a bill, you're going to do it. If you don't automate it, if you don't treat it like a bill, if you're always telling yourself like, whatever's left over at the end of the month, that's what I'm going to do, you're never going to do it. Like, unless you feel the pressure and you feel the urgency, you just have to treat it like a bill. And it's like, automation is the way to do that.
I love the information you're sharing on this episode, Chloe. So just to unpack some of the things you said, for people who don't know what ETF stands for, it stands for Exchange Traded Fund. And when it comes to funds, they can be packaged in one of a couple of ways. So an exchange traded fund is a fund that is packaged up like an individual stock. If you search for the share price of a company on Google, you'll notice that throughout the trading day, the price will move. And this is how traders actually make their money. They'll buy low and try and sell high on the same day. And sometimes you can short stuff and buy high and sell low, but we won't go into that. So with an ETF, you're buying something that's diversified, but the way that you have to buy it, as Chloe said, is that you need to go into the investment platform and like buy it anew. But with an index fund, you can basically set up a direct debit, that's what we call them in the UK, and have it go out on the same day as the rest of your bills. And you can start with as little as £25, on some platforms. And I think the good thing about this is it gets you into a habit of saving and investing regularly, which is what Chloe's basically trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, when we say funds, that's the bag of chocolates. So an ETF is still a bag of chocolates. Now, granted, ETFs, I always tell people ETFs are not as easy to spot when they are truly diversified as with mutual funds that are index funds, because ETFs, you can often have very, very specific ETFs because ETFs can mirror anything. And not to get too deep into the weeds, it's just something to keep in mind is that with index funds, when we say the word index fund, it can be a mutual fund or it can be an ETF. Usually with mutual funds, you'll know it's an index fund because it has the word index in the title.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah.
But with ETFs, they don't always have that because not all ETFs are index funds.
And this is another thing which I think is, I guess, why we have jobs, right? Which is there is a business side to investing as well, which is that the fund manager is looking to get people's money in the door so that they can invest it on behalf of people, but also so that they can take a percentage of that as fees. And you have to remember that, yes, you're investing, but there's also a business side to what you're investing into. Like there's a company somewhere that's got to administer the whole thing. The result of this is that when you go into an investment platform and you put in the word index or ETF, 100 things come up. It's almost like when you go to Amazon and you put in sunglasses. There's going to be like 100 different types of sunglasses. But as Chloe said, if you want to know the difference between like an index fund and an index ETF, it will normally have the word either index or ETF in the title. And you can use that to distinguish between the two.
And also I realized we haven't even identified or explained what index is as we were talking. I was like, hang on. For those who are like, wait, what is that? Index, again, going back to like it just being a language, and this is something that Timmy and I were talking about before I think we hit record, is investing is just a language, which is good for all of us who don't like math and don't like numbers or get overwhelmed by that. But index is really just a jargon, fancy word for a grouping of different investments. That's it. That's all it is. So when you hear the word index, just think, oh, a grouping of investments. That could be a bunch of REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. It could be a bunch of stocks. It could be a bunch of bonds. It could be a combination of all of those things. But an index, like the S&P 500, that's a grouping of 500 of the largest US stocks inside of it. When we're talking about buying index funds, that index fund is going to mirror the index. So whatever the index is, whether it's the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, or Dow Jones, whatever it is, or you guys have the FTSE, right?
We have the so in the UK, it's the FTSE, started in the 80s. FTSE Russell, a research company, wanted to find a way to track how publicly traded businesses were performing in the UK. They looked at the 100 biggest. Today, that's the likes of Tesco, it's the likes of EasyJet, Barclays, loads of JD Sports. Those are companies that we all use in there. And actually a few companies that you may not have heard of, or like parent companies. But yeah, an index, as Chloe said, is just a grouping of companies. And it's like, if you can track how that group of companies are doing, it can be used as a proxy for how the wider economy is doing or how business is doing at large. In the UK, the premier one is the FTSE 100. In the US, the premier one is the S&P 500. S&P, Standard & Poor's, just another research company. Yeah,
exactly. So it's another one where, like, if you're afraid of the risk of investing, imagine, I like to tell people, it's like when you're buying an index fund that's well diversified and has a broad market, you're betting on the entire United States economy, or you're betting on the entire world economy. And when we look at charts that show the performance over the long term of the United States, of the total stock market, sure, you're going to see a lot of ups and downs. You're going to see a lot of things happening. But when you zoom out and you look at the chart, it's like, oh, but generally we're heading in the right direction. That's a good thing. And so hopefully that eases people's minds when they're like, wait, isn't this risky?
Yeah. There's another great point that I read in a great book called The Little Book of Common Sense Investing, written by Jack Bogle, the creator of the index fund, actually. And part of the reason why the S&P 500 is used as like the index is because about half of the profits that flow into the United States are actually from around the world. Like I have an iPad in front of me, got a Google phone. We all use Meta's platforms. So it's like American corporations are global corporations because of their presence. I actually happen to track the global stock markets. I have a global tracker fund, but that is like 2/3 US anyway, because the US is the biggest stock market. I'm loving this conversation. I love it when I can talk about investing and just go back and forth.
Yeah,
and also
I have to always remind myself, I'm like, okay, wait, but we got to go back and define what an index is, because some people, we've already lost them.
No, people, when I do events and talk about this stuff, you'll have the room's attention for like an hour, 2 hours. People want to know about this stuff, and it is quite a rabbit hole you can go down. It's really interesting too. So what are the tips that you give to people who want to get started? Because, you know, there's a difference between knowing what you have to do and doing what you know you have to do. What tips do you give to people who have that kind of mindset gap?
So I think the number one thing is to educate yourself, because the fear of it being risky, the fear of you losing your money, all of the fear that you have around it, which most of us do when it comes to investing, that's going to go away when you can start to educate yourself. And number two, it is not above you. It is not. The good thing is there's so much education out there, which is, I know, can be a bad thing too, because you don't know who to listen to. But when you start educating yourself, and you 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, I don't care what it is, take 1% better every week if that's all we need. That's going to be huge. But don't let you educating yourself stop you from getting started. Because here's the thing, you're never going to know everything. You're never going to fully understand every in and out of the stock market, and you don't need to. So what I always tell people is, like, people will be like, well, what do you think about target date funds? What do you think about robo-advisors? And I'm a huge advocate of, if it gets you started, I don't care. Like, if you want to pay 0.25% fee for a robo-advisor and they get you started, go for it. But I tell you what, as soon as you understand and learn what's inside of that robo-advisor, you're going to realize it's all index funds, all of it. Even if you're using a financial advisor, if the financial advisor is worth their salt at all, guess what they're going to be investing in? Index funds. So I think it's incredibly important for us to take ownership. And so I guess that's tip 3 is take ownership, because no one else is going to care about this. No one else is going to do this for you. And even the people who do it for you, which I'm using air quotes, you have to understand what they're doing. Because if you do not understand what they're doing, you have no idea if they're doing what's in your best interest or not.
And I'm going to try and attempt an analogy live.
Let's hear it. Yes.
So I kind of feel like I agree with what you just said. I think getting started and then getting good. Works when it comes to most things. On the educate yourself point, to give a very practical example, when I started investing in my mid-20s and my early 30s now, I started off by watching Warren Buffett's interviews with Becky Quick on CNBC. She's been interviewing him for years. Warren Buffett is like world famous investor, just like Google him. She's been interviewing him for years, and she would just ask him about index funds, about what's going on in the economy, about how Berkshire Hathaway, his company, is doing. And just it's a video and it's an interview. So it's a really low friction way to just get used to hearing the terminology and kind of learning about the history of it all as well. The amazing thing about him is that he's in his 90s now. So he's literally like born just after the Great Depression, lived through the Cold War, lived through the dot-com bubble, lived through like 9/11. He's kind of seen it all. So it's a great fount of wisdom when it comes to financial knowledge, but also life knowledge as well. And then on the point about if, like using a robo-advisor, but then once you realize what's happening, you're going to want to
make
take
changes
ownership over it.
Yeah.
I kind of think of that like, imagine you didn't know how to cook at all.
Yep.
You start out by buying like ready meals, like microwave meals.
Yeah. Or HelloFresh.
Yeah. Or HelloFresh or Gusto or something. Do you have Gusto in the States?
Gusto in the States is a payroll company.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like HelloFresh here.
Yeah.
But you start off with like a meal kit company, and you use that to get you into it. And then as you learn how to cook, you're like, I can buy fresh ingredients. I can combine them in this way. No, like investing is a lot like that. There is, of course, no shame in not knowing something if it was never taught to you. You have to start somewhere. But I promise you, once you start learning about this stuff, it's going to be so engaging, and you're just going to want to go deeper down the rabbit hole.
Oh, that's the beautiful thing about it. It's actually so funny when I have like students graduate the Lazy Investors course, they'll be like, what else? What's next? I'm like, did you not pay attention. I was like, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to learn more about dividend stocks, or I want to start trading. I'm like, wait a second, what just happened here? Like, this is the way. But it's the passion. It's like oh my gosh, this is so exciting. This is what I like whenever I share like the investments in my portfolio, I'm always embarrassed because I have so many different funds. I don't need all the different funds that are in my portfolio, but it was because of my curiosity and my excitement when I first got started. I was just like, I'm going to buy this index fund and this one too. When you look at my allocations, it's like mostly large cap US, but it's okay. It's okay to like be excited and be curious, and the overwhelm you feel right now, it's going to get less and less and less. And I promise you, if you get started, that's where so much of the fear is. When you get started and let's say you put $200 in and you see it doesn't all disappear overnight, you're gonna be like, okay, maybe I can do $200 more.
It's a good point. I think what helped me, obviously this is gonna be different for everyone, but what helped me when I first got started investing was taking the amount of money that I was prepared to lose completely. Knowing that I wouldn't lose it completely, but it was literally like 50 quid.
Right.
And just and being like, look, the cost of me investing using this £50 is gonna be me teaching myself how to invest. And then you can start small and then you can build your way up. I want to talk to you about the Lazy Investors course because turns over 6 figures a year, which is still, it's like phenomenal. And yeah, like what do you teach your students and why do you think it's been so successful?
I think it's been successful. I was like, the way I was about to word this it sounded very cocky, but it's true. I think it's because of me. Because people see the way I show up on the internet and they're like, wait, this girl is a finance girl? They're like, she's on here wearing booty shorts, dancing like an idiot and teaching me about Roth IRAs. And suddenly I don't feel intimidated anymore. Suddenly I don't feel like this is above me, like that I need a dude in a suit to teach me how to do this. Because I tell you what, I can't tell you how many women have come to me and said, I tried to talk to my financial advisor and he was super condescending to me. And he made me feel stupid. He made me feel embarrassed. And now I don't want to do it. And it's like, yeah, I know. That's kind of what they do. That's what they do because they want to keep you. They want you to continue paying the fees. But I think it's because I am so not what you would expect. And I also do not teach the way you would expect a finance person to teach. And then I always love telling people, like, I never thought I would be this person. I never thought I would understand the stock market enough to be able to teach people and educate people on how to do it. I studied English and Spanish, guys. I was not on this path to educate people about money, but that I think shows people like, oh, well, maybe I'm not going to be a Warren Buffett someday, but I could be a Clo Bare. And like when people tell that to me, I'm always just like, yes, like that is why I do what I do, because there's so many feelings involved with our money and our money journey, especially once you get into your late 20s and your 30s and your 40s, you're like, there's so much shame. You're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much shame around the fact that I don't know this stuff, even though no one's ever given you a lesson. But to be able to make somebody laugh, and then that like kind of opens the door of like, wait a second, I never thought about following a finance person before, but this chick's crazy. Let me follow her. She's funny. And also I'm learning something at the same time. And it's a good combination.
And I think what people need to realize is that like the Russian doll example you've given before, that piece of content has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. There's like hundreds of comments underneath that, people going, wow, I finally get this. You're literally standing there with baskets going, this small dustbin goes in the bigger dustbin.
And repeating it.
No, so props to you. And you must be on like 100K followers.
Oh yeah, we're on our way to 200 now. I think we're at 160,000, which is crazy because like I said, we didn't, back in March 2021, I think we had 2,500. So
I remember those days.
Yeah, that's when Timmy and I first connected. So yeah, I mean, when it goes back to, to answer your question of like, why do I think the Lazy Investors course has been successful is because I think that, you know, there's a lot of content creators out there who are aspirational. And I know that I'm aspirational in some ways to some people, but I think more than that, I'm relatable. And it's like, I've been where they've been. I know what my audience feels. I know what they're going through. And I know the shame and the feelings that are there. And what I try to do is just let them know they could do this too. Like that, you know, obviously we're all going to be on different paths. We're going to do it at different rates. It's all going to depend on a variety of factors, but like it is not above you. So that's really what my goal has always been, is to be this person that people feel comfortable with asking the questions that make us feel dumb, you know? So, I think that's why.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm sure that the success is going to be continued, and I'm really glad that people have someone like you to answer their questions.
Same to you.
Yeah, trying. I've got some big plans for like rest of the year and next year as well. So
I'm excited for you.
Let's keep fighting the good fight. Whilst I got your time here, there's a couple other things I wanted to get your like genuine opinion on, because you started by saying that you were actually in $70,000 worth of debt.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you balance the whole paying off debt, saving and investing equation?
Yeah, so it all, unfortunately, the answer is it's always going to depend. You have to understand your numbers. You have to understand, and what I teach people is how to run those numbers so that you can figure out, like, okay, does it make more sense for me to do a combination of paying off my debt and investing, or does it make more sense for me to really focus on paying off this debt? It's
because something that Warren Buffett says, sorry to jump in, is that if you have like money sitting on a credit card at 18%, the best investment you can make is to pay it off completely, because to make 18% on an investment is, you need to be like a professional basically.
Well, but here's the thing. It's not that that's wrong, and it's not that I disagree. It depends, though. I still think it depends, because here's a dollar at the age of 20 invested is not the same as a dollar invested at the age of 50. Like, if it's your first dollar at the age of 20, you're going to earn so much more than 18% on that. You know what I mean? But it always depends on the life circumstances as well. It depends on, like, okay, how much do you really have in debt on this? How much is the interest rate? What is the cash flow situation? And I think, too, we're so good at being black and white when it comes to this stuff, where it's like, no, you don't invest a single dollar until that's paid off. And I think that's actually really damaging. I think, okay, sure, yeah, absolutely prioritize paying off that 18%. And unfortunately in the US, a lot of times it's going to be 20 plus, it's going to be 27. I've seen people at 27% interest rates. Yeah, of course we want to pay that off as soon as possible. But that doesn't mean that we stop getting our 401k match. That doesn't mean that you can't invest a single dollar, because equally important is getting into the habit of investing as quickly as possible, because your money is going to grow so much more significantly, way more than 18%, if you are starting early and you are staying consistent. So I just don't think it's an apples to apples kind of comparison. That's what a lot of people say, is like, well, you're never going to get 18% in the stock market. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not going to be in debt for hopefully 30 years of credit card debt. Mm-hmm. So like, that's just not an apples to apples comparison. I think you have to run the numbers to understand, like, okay, in this scenario, if I dedicate all my money to paying off my debt and then I start investing at this point, what are my numbers going to look like potentially? And then scenario 2, well, what if I do a split? What if I do, an extra $100 a month on my debt and I also continue to invest like $20? What are those numbers going to look like? So that's what I like to teach people is, I'm going to teach you how to run the numbers so you can make that decision for yourself, because everybody's going to be in a different situation. And then here's the thing too, there are options when it comes to your debt. There's not options when it comes to retirement. Like, you have to do the work. You have to get started right away. So that's why it's just such an area of gray. I am all for investing even if you have debt. Like, period, end of story, especially if you have low interest debt, especially. I actually was just talking to somebody the other day who was talking about who has not started investing yet. They're 28 and they were telling me they were trying to pay off their car early. And I was like, what's the interest rate? 4.5%. I was like, what are you doing? Absolutely not. We are not paying that off early. We need to be investing. Like, unless cash flow is this huge issue, this needs to be going towards your investments, because you're young. You can get started now. You haven't started yet. Like, this is the time. So that's why it's super nuanced. But I think, unfortunately, the reason the debt-free at all costs messaging works so well is because it's easy. It's simple. It's like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my debt. It's super black and white. That's easy. We want easy when it comes to finances. But the truth of what's actually best for you is usually going to be some area of gray. It's not going to be just, forget about your debt, or forget about investing until you're debt free.
So to use a worked example, it sounds like you're saying that if you have a bunch of money on a credit card, and let's say for argument's sake, it's high interest, that's obviously something you're going to want to pay off. So make sure you're making your minimum payments, make sure that you're not missing any payments and stuff. But that doesn't mean that you can't take $25 a month, £25 a month and start investing into an index fund at the same time. Because as you're paying this down, your investments are increasing, And if you're at an earlier life stage, that's also going to compound over time.
Significantly.
So that's a nuance that you're highlighting.
Exactly. That's a huge nuance, but it's also just understanding the numbers of like, okay, if I put extra on this, like running those numbers takes all the guessing out of it. You know, if I wait to invest for 3 years, I'm going to have $400,000 left in retirement, even though I spent those 3 years paying off my high interest debt or my mid interest debt. So it's like understanding that and working the numbers is incredibly helpful. But yes, let me also just clarify, I am not telling people to not pay off their debt or miss your minimum payments. Credit scores matter. But it's the nuance that I think is really important.
Yeah. And of course, something that happens in the UK is even if you have a lot of consumer debt, you will still be paying into a pension. You know, we have auto enrollment in this country,
which we don't have in the US. That's the thing. Is like, can you imagine if everybody who had debt would never get started with investing because they were too busy focusing on their debt? Like that's how people get to be in their 30s or their 40s and have never invested a dollar because of that messaging. And like, not to name names, but there's someone very popular in the United States who everybody knows, who's all about debt freedom, who tells people to not even contribute to their 401ks if they have debt. And we're talking any type of debt except for your mortgage. And that's just bad advice because your 401k, if you get a match in your 401k, that's 100% return on your investment.
That's your workplace pension.
Yes, exactly. So if you put in 3% and your employer matches 3%, why would you not take that? That's idiotic. That's essentially part of your salary. But that is the message that's out there, and that's what we're battling against. Okay.
That person may or may not be David Ramsey.
I wasn't going to say it.
How do you feel about investing versus buying a house? Because this is also another, it's another area where it can be quite black and white.
Yeah.
You have some people wanting to buy a house at all costs. I know home ownership is like super important in British culture.
Yeah.
But then you got some other people saying, oh, a home, Ramit Sethi, says, you know, your home is not an investment. That's also one of the themes in Rich Dad, Poor Dad as well. Where do you stand on that?
I agree for most people. Like the home is often a emotional purchase. It's not, we don't go into it usually thinking about it being an investment, or we don't run the numbers as an investment. When you're buying a home for investment purposes, the people who are investing in real estate, they are running a bajillion different kinds of numbers. You're running the CapEx expenditure, you're running how much do you need to put aside each month for like different repairs that you know are going to happen. We don't treat our homes like that, our primary homes. And I mean, if you do, good job. But most of us don't. We do it because we love it, because we want the crown molding, because we want the view, because we want, you know, to raise the family. And that's okay. That's totally okay if you're buying a home because you want to buy a home, because you want it, you know, to be part of your journey. I think the thing that I'm a huge advocate on is a home is not a requirement to build wealth. Like buying a home is not a requirement. I'm going to say it again. Buying a home is not a requirement to build wealth. And especially now with the housing crisis, I mean, buying a home in the US, there was a recent study, and I can't remember who did it, but they were looking at what is the average percentage of people's income that was going towards their housing. And the general recommendation is it should be below 30%. And they found that in some cities and some states, especially like California, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., people are spending upwards of, and this is for just home ownership, we're not talking about rent, upwards of 60% of their take-home pay on home ownership because of this American dream that tells you you are not succeeding in life unless you own a home. And so what are people doing? They are going outside of their budget. They are stretching to make it work. They're believing, oh, I'll just make more money someday. And that's putting them in bad situations where they can't save a retirement. They don't have emergency funds. When something happens to that house, how are they going to pay for it? They're going to go into credit card debt. So that's where it's like, to me, the harder question is like, yeah, can a home be an investment? Absolutely. Is it always going to go up in value? Absolutely not. That's not just like, yeah, if you buy a house, it's going to go up in value. It's kind of like a forced savings for some people because, yeah, you're going to get money back, hopefully. Whether it's the amount of money you put into it or not is a questionable thing because we know we don't get any money back when we rent. But renting is not throwing away money. Renting is paying for a home over your space. The studio space that we're in right now, do you feel like you threw away money for it?
No.
Exactly.
I'll make the money back on the podcast.
Right. Well, and it's like your home is is it doesn't have to be this something that you own. And when you look at how much people spend on their homes outside of just what they think a lot of people think that your mortgage is just what you're spending on your home. And that's so far from the truth, like, especially in the US. And I don't know how it works here, but you've got, the mortgage is just the beginning. That's the minimum that you're going to pay. Everything else, the insurance, the homeowners association fees, the interest.
Every month.
There's just
like a few hundred will be added onto your mortgage balance in the form of interest. And I remember before I bought a home, I didn't know any of this. I learned all of it retrospectively. To speak in defense, well, we're not attacking anyone, but just to speak from the perspective of people that are trying to get on the property ladder within UK context, rents are just through the roof. One, two, it's very difficult to rent well. Very difficult. I remember when I was renting, you just feel like you're the product. You're the product on the end of a chain of like a bunch of business deals. I lived in a home, one of my first house I ever rented properly, that was so moldy that my shoes became moldy.
Oh my gosh, how was that legal?
Yeah. It was so moldy, my shoes became moldy, my rucksack became moldy.
You could have like lung damage from that.
I had to buy these kind of water catchy things and put them in the cupboards. And you email the landlord and they're just like, yeah, open the windows. So it's like, I'm paying you, you're providing me a service. I have never met you. My stuff is turning furry and you don't even want to like help.
That's insane.
And then that same property kicked me out with 2 months notice, gave me what's called a Section 21 when I fell outside of my contract. So this is part of the reason why people are like, okay, I just want to buy a house.
Yeah, no, and I understand.
I want to be able to like nail something to the wall.
Right.
I want to know that I'm still going to be living there in a year's time. Like people are moving every year.
Yeah, no,
because you can't rent well.
And that's the thing is like, it's such a complicated topic. I think for me, what I like to do is first remove the stigma of renting because it's not possible for people to buy in the US right now. And I know it's not possible. It's just really difficult to buy in the US right now. But then on the flip side, it's also very difficult to rent in many places too. Like it's becoming incredibly unaffordable and it's a worldwide problem. Yeah. Like we're running into that issue everywhere.
And we solve it by going like, having a roof over your head should be the bare minimum.
It's a human right. It is a basic human right. And that's the crazy thing is that some people don't think it's a basic human right.
It's not an investment opportunity. Well, it can be an investment opportunity, but only when everyone can live somewhere.
Yeah. Like have you seen like the TikToks where people are like, I have a crazy idea. If two people were trying to buy a home, how about it goes to the person who has not bought or who doesn't own a home yet? Like, that's the issue is like when we look at like home ownership and we've commoditized. That doesn't sound right.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's now become just this massive issue because we've got all these Airbnbs, we've got all these short-term rentals, we've got all these huge companies buying up all these properties and using them for things other than just people's homes.
And I'm not against people making money. I'm not against business opportunities, but just not when the worst off person
can't
afford to live somewhere. Once the worst off person's doing okay, then make as much money as you want.
No, Timmy's like, this podcast is going to get canceled. Chloe's calling out real estate investors. No, I agree. I think it's just like, I would love to live in a world someday where we take care of people.
Me too.
You know?
Me too. Before I ask you the question that we ask everyone, I also want to talk to you a bit about success because we started off by talking about success and about how buying a home is a marker for success. And what does success mean to you? If not buying the house with a picket fence?
Yeah, that is something that has been evolving for me. We were just talking about this when I got on. We were talking about, my business is about to reach 7 figures in revenue since it was started in March 2021. And that's super, super exciting and crazy. Like I can't even comprehend that, honestly. And we were talking about podcasting and things like that. And one of the things that I told you was, I used to think success more in the traditional way of like, oh, you want to be, featured on television shows. And I used to get jealous of people who would get the, billboards in Times Square. And I wanted to be doing all the stuff like that I saw my peers getting these opportunities. I wanted to fly all over and speak at these events. And I thought that that's what I was like going for. But now I think it's honestly, since moving to San Diego, I've just noticed how much people live their lives to live there. Like, it's not about what you do as much. It's about how do you get the most enjoyment out of life? How do you spend time with the people that you love? And having that I've only been there since May, having that in the last like 6 months, I've just been so much happier. I've just been so much more at peace. I've like it's gonna get me choked up. Like, I have community, and that's been making me question a lot of like, what do I want to do? And we were talking about this, like, you and I both have the best of both worlds, of all the worlds. We have this incredible opportunity where we get to do something good and help people with their money and help people figure out that stuff, which is huge. We both have had that experience ourselves. We know how life-changing that is. We also make money from it, and we also get to be our own bosses. And like, that's amazing and incredible. And lately, what I've been asking myself is, okay, but what else? Like, do I want, how if I could design this business in a way that was completely fit for my life, what would it look like? And I think I'm still figuring that out. I think for me, it's about getting rid of the stuff that I feel like I have to do, and focusing more on what I actually want to be doing while still helping people. Like, helping people is at the forefront of it. I want more money into the hands of more people, but I also want to live my life. And Clo Bare has been my entire life since March 2021, if not January 2021, when I was gearing up for it. And I feel like I'm just now getting back to Chloe. And this Chloe is a very different version of herself. You know, we've got security, we've been through therapy, we speak in plural person. What's we? I was like, never mind. I'm speaking in we pronouns apparently. But I think for me, that just comes with like living my life more, rather than focusing constantly on success. And like, in that way, that is success to me, is like living a balanced life where I am spending time with people I love, doing things I love, and community. I mean, community, in-person community, like having that has just been so life-changing for me. So I guess for me, success is just like this balanced, complete, peaceful life.
I love that answer. It resonates with me in a huge way. I agree with so much of it. We were saying before that like the game of life is you get 70 to 100 years to exist, to see, to smell, to meet people, to do stuff. How do you want to spend your time?
Yeah.
How would you spend your time if you were independently wealthy? Would you spend it trying to be featured in this and that place or doing this and that thing? Like, whatever is authentically you, go for that. But I also want to say to you, Chloe, do not underestimate the impact that you can have in this world. You're already having an impact and you're impacting loads of different people, but the speaking on stages and the doing the podcast, whatever that looks like, these are all just vehicles for you to reach more and more people. And you've done so much good already, and you could reach so many more people. Like, the thing about the internet is that you're always posting for a potential audience of like 8 billion people.
Yeah, no pressure.
So I think we both agree, but like, I think you have way, way more impact to make.
Yeah, we'll see. I think I first have to take care of myself a little bit. This last year has been really hard health-wise. Ever since I had COVID back in July 2021 or 2022, my health just has not been the same. And so I think I'm getting to this place where we're learning how to make my business lazy, because my business has not been lazy at all. And so I think that once I have a extended period of time where I'm not working so hard, then I might be ready for, okay, what else? How else do I want to get the message out? How else do I want to do this? Clo Bare's not going anywhere. For anybody who's listening, they're like, oh no, it's just me being very, very intentional about where I am putting my time and saying no to the things that are not aligned with what I need right now. And then in order to get to the place where I am exploring new avenues of reach, like, I have to first take care of myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but we'll see what happens next.
Love it. Question we love to ask everyone to wrap up is, what's the best money advice you've ever received? Who shared it with you, and what did you learn?
That's such a good question. I think the best money advice I got actually came from a ex-boss of mine who was very much a mentor in my journey. Shout out to Christy. I think when I was in my 9 to 5, I always undervalued myself. And she was such a savage when it came to asking for more money. And she's a woman, she's got 2 kids, she's the breadwinner of the home. And I'm a huge advocate for raising your money as much as possible while also not being miserable. I don't want people to be miserable. But she told me, price yourself like a house. And at the time, it didn't really make much sense to me. But she was like, when you're going into these job interviews, when you're going into a new position, like you're not just going in with your skill set on, like, let's say it's a communications job. You're not just going in with a communication skill set. You also have project management experience, which is valuable. That adds on, like add on some money for that. You're also going in with technical writing skills. Like that's add on to that. Like you're also going in with these things. And I was like, oh, wow. I never really thought about that. You've got leadership skills, like price yourself like a house. And because of that, and like also just having her as a mentor to be like, hey, I'm going after this new job and this is what I think I'm going to ask for, she'd always be like, ask for more. Having a woman in my life who was so savage about that, it just made me realize I could make as much money as I wanted. And obviously there are always trade-offs, and you have to decide what trade-offs are you willing to make and what trade-offs are you not willing to make. But kind of transforming that belief of, like, when I graduated with an English and Spanish degree, I thought at most I'd ever make was like $50K. And I was like concerned I'd be homeless at some point because I studied writing, you know, realizing like, no, it's in my control and I can do exactly what I want if I am strategic about it and you know, work hard. That was life-changing for me. I mean, I wouldn't have made all the strides in my net worth had I not focused for a period of my time on increasing my income. But again, that is with the asterisk of I never want anyone to be miserable out there. So it's not about increasing. I was not miserable doing that. Like there was no time when I was like, oh, this sucks and I'm selling my soul for these golden handcuffs. It was about how can I make as much money as possible doing what I don't hate. You know, that doesn't impact my life in a negative way. And that is something I see a lot of women believing that, oh, if I make more money, I'm going to have these more responsibilities, or I'm going to have way more stress, or I'm going to have, you know, this thing that I don't want. And it's like, do you know that for sure? Or is that something you're just telling yourself? And I think a lot of the times it's something we're telling ourselves. So I always tell people to just like look and find out, because you never know. And I tell you what, an extra $30K, that can make a huge difference in a lot of our lives.
Could definitely invest that.
Right. Save it. You can go on vacation. You can get the massages. You can do a lot of good for yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for that advice, Chloe. So where can people find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, I am most active on Instagram at Clo Bare Money Coach. Bare is just spelled Bare.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for watching this week's episode of the Mr MoneyJar Show. If you enjoyed it, then please do subscribe, as it helps out the show a lot and enables us to continue running. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another special guest. I've been your host, Timmy Merriman Johnson.